Welcome to Post-Burnout.com interviews. My name is Aaron Kavanagh and I'm the website's founder and editor-in-chief. Post-Burnout.com is a culture website dedicated to venerating burnt-out artists the world over. Our interviews are mainly recorded to be transcribed, but every now and again we release the audio in a series we call Post-Burnout.com interviews. If you enjoy what we do, be sure to subscribe. In this edition of Post-Burnout.com interviews, we speak with Damien McKenna, the frontman of the Dundalk indie folk act Orwells 84. In this interview, recorded about 2 weeks after the release of their debut album, The Crucible, we discuss the formation of the band, their music, the writing, the theatrical influence of the band as a multimedia project, the politics featured on The Crucible, and more. I think this interview was probably one of the best ones we have done so far, and generally we at Post-Burnout avoid giving our opinions on the music we cover, instead just focusing on giving the artist exposure regardless of our opinions. With that said, we do genuinely think that Orwells 84, if given the right push and exposure, could probably be one of the most popular bands in the country. Their music is that good, and now at the moment they're actually on a bit of a sabbatical for a couple of months. So hopefully this interview can give the album a bit of a second wind in that kind of dormant period, I guess. Yeah, so the first thing I just wanted to ask was how you guys kind of got started, because I think Orwell's 84 has a very unique sound that's somewhat uncomparable. Yeah, so I was wondering what was the sort of intent, and was that sound kind of the intent from the get-go?
No, that wasn't the intent from the get-go. No, originally, like, the idea was that the band could take, or the sound could take, many incarnations, and it originally was myself. So, like, by saying by calling myself Orwell's 84, or calling the project or the band Orwell's 84, the idea was that you could interchange parts depending on what you wanted to come up with. So um, that was the original intent, and we were trying something, or we were recording something. I think this was a couple of years ago now, and someone suggested, "Oh, you should get a cello player and play the cello." And that just kind of resonated. And the more and more we played then with Ella, the more we were like, "Well, we'll just go this direction." Really, is and we kind of landed on it. And yeah, that's kind of how it kind of solidified itself. So it was a happy accident. And I mean, we're still trying to, even now on this album, we're still trying to experiment with, how do you make everything kind of fit? When you have so many members, it's hard to make everything fit. But I'm always trending to still kind of go back and try something different, or try a different genre, or try an album full of synths, or whatever. So the initial intent is still always there, but that was the original concept, and it was kind of, it was based around that kind of the idea of that Plastic Ono band, where anyone could play in the band, depending on whatever the music needed at the time, or wherever the lyrics were taking it. So
Yeah, and you guys formed in Dundalk. I was wondering, like, were all the members from there? Was that like a completely in county experiment?
yeah, well, there's been loads and loads and loads of members, but the majority of them have been from Dundalk, and but we're all from different backgrounds. Roisin's a trad player. Ella's, she's fellow. She played the cross border orchestra. Myself and Sean probably would have been in bands together for a while, and then Peter and Pork are they're from a totally different band and background. But
Mhm.
all of us from Dundalk, but musically, it's very, very vast and very eclectic.
Yeah, and like, so what was the commonality, I guess, when getting people from so many different disciplines into the band? What was I guess, the common goal, to the extent that there was one?
I think the common goal was definitely, I think everyone just bought into the music. And well, first and foremost, actually, I have to say it was probably that we all got on, you know, and it's hard to, excuse me, it's hard to, be in a band in
Yeah,
general with two or three people,
yeah,
and if no one gets on, but once I think we all just we're still all friends, and at the end of the day, we're always going to be friends. Like for example, on Friday we were gigging in Derry and our bus broke down and we were stuck so we had to load 2 cars and drive to Derry and be late and play but at the end of the day we were still laughing about it and we were joking about it and I think the commonality in terms of that is just that we're human, and that we enjoy each other's company,
Yeah.
and then to dress that up even more so, like, we all enjoy the music, like, and we all have a creative input, so no one's kind of left out. It's everyone has a say, and everyone has the right to give the ideas.
Your new album, the Crucible, was released quite recently, about 2 weeks ago, I think, at this point. And yeah, I was wondering. I mean, when you get with a name like the Crucible, I think it has this very sort of dramatic name. But when you listen to the album, it doesn't really feel like a concept album necessarily, but it does feel like a very thematic album. It feels like there's a lot of common themes about kind of modern living. Yeah, I was wondering what was sort of the intent with this album, to the extent that there was one.
Yeah, I mean, look, it's no coincidence that the majority of the songs I had wrote the majority or had started writing the majority of the songs during lockdown, so there's no coincidence there. But yeah, I mean, straight away from Wake Up, and from then on, like it's a real kind of, I found it's kind of like it's definitely something like you can look in on society.
Mm-hmm.
That makes sense. It's kind of it's a real focus on society, and I'm not saying that to try and be, this kind of artistic, we're trying to spotlight society, whatever. That's not what I'm trying to say. But genuinely, there were the themes that came out, and I think that kind of we drew on the idea of this Orwell's 84, this 1984 thing, and this dystopian outlook. Now, we were very lucky that, some would say that the government in Ireland is not doing the best of jobs, so we were kind of very lucky that was the case, and we could build on it from there. But these things kept coming up, and especially during lockdown, which, lockdown for a lot of people highlighted things that, they didn't have the time to focus on before. Right. So, the social contract was originally called Lockdown Demo.
Yeah.
And in that, all I wanted to do was just highlight, the homeless issue. And just when I was starting to write the song, the Me Too movement started again in Ireland, So, the first and the second verse wrote itself, and of course, watching a lot of television. So it all kind of drew, it was easy at that time, as I say, to draw on a lot of these things. There was no intent to do it. But when it started to happen, it just kind of all fit into place, and then songs like, and then, well, this is kind of just what kind of happens, because you're in the mindset. So, like, as I say, songs like Wake Up, Social Contract, Taking Liberties, which is literally just an overheard conversation about, it's an overheard conversation about somewhere to take heroin in Dublin by the Liberties. Well, it's actually by Sheriff Street, and then we were talking more about the Liberties. It's just in places where I work. So these were all just things that were happening around me, and I excuse me, I thought to myself, it would be wrong for me not to highlight these things. It'd be wrong for me as someone who's going to be putting, the voice out there or their ideas out there, to not highlight these things. That makes sense, So there was no common theme, but as it grew and grew and grew, it kind of became a thematic or a concept album, nearly, But the Crucible has nothing to do with that concept either. Like, it's just where we rehearse. That's the name of this place where we rehearse,
Okay.
And it's also where the World Snooker Championships are on. So.
Yeah, I was wondering also, like, if on kind of a metatextual level, there was also the Crucible defining, actually making the album.
Well, so it's where we rehearse is, it's my uncle's old factory. Then the back of it, he put in a snooker table, and my dad and my aunties and uncles and my mum and all that would have gone there years ago, and they nicknamed that place the Crucible. because of the snooker table. And then I suggested it just because we were looking for names for the album, and all my names are all like, they were all very long and again, trying to, I don't know, express something. But everyone was like, no, it should just be like one word, something. And then Arctic Monkeys had The Car had just been released at the time, and I was like, what about like? So then I was thinking, there. And I said, what about The Crucible? And Peter, who's in the band, he went and he Googled what The Crucible meant, and it seemingly means like a melting pot in which loads of ideas or different things can be brought together. So it actually just kind of fit, and we were like, oh, it has to be called The Crucible now, But it's literally where we were at. Like if we were meeting up on Thursday, it'll be like, well, we'll see you then in the Crucible. Yeah, see you then in the Crucible.
Yeah.
So
I was wondering, actually, when it comes to the Orwells 84, I find the band to be quite theatrical. And I think when you say theatrical, the connotation is often like, pyrotechnics and props and big stage production, elaborate stage production. I mean, theatrical more in the sense of like a black box theater kind of way, in the sense that it feels like, I know, like the album, I think weaves through like classic Irish literature and plays in the sense of it molds kind of elegy with humor and with introspection and with societal critique. And it really feels like, it really feels like, I don't know, like a Brendan Behan play or something. I was wondering, like, beyond music, I mean, what influences you have in terms of writers, in terms of maybe playwrights, or in terms of authors or anything like that?
oh yeah, definitely. I mean, like, yeah, like that's you've hit the nail on the head. We did an Anton production, which was that was designed as a theatrical piece. We did the concept, the live show was a concept during lockdown, and we couldn't do anything, and we shot it live in a theater. We used the set designer and a graphic designer to kind of create everything around us, and it's certainly something that we love to do, and especially when we were creating the music, and we always speak about this soundscape of what the music has to be and has to fit, and it is. You're exactly right. It's like small acts of a play, and everything, and even call like if you would have seen on Spotify, we've got the Shock, which is obviously supposed to be Irish for in, and then on some platforms we have a mock, which is out, and it's another piece of music. And we were always trying to think about how we can kind of rap, or how we can produce this music, and how we can kind of showcase it and highlight it. And even on the first EP on the vinyl, we did a concept piece called The Marriage of Heaven and Hell, which was based off William Blake, a William Blake poem. So it's always there, and it's always something that we're always considering. And I would be certainly heavily influenced by Behan, Flann O'Brien, Yeats, a lot of the Irish writers, Sean O'Casey. So all the time drawing, and not just George Orwell, but all the time drawing on all the influences that are around us, both for their use of language, but also their ideals, so, and how they kind of showcase their pieces. So like, if you go, like you're speaking about playwrights, but if you talk about like likes of Baron Shaw, or like other playwrights, I don't know if I'm really kind of getting to what you're saying, but yeah, that's kind of, you would definitely be on that kind of wavelength, of trying to piece together everything and trying to make everything a product, if that makes sense, or a piece of art. That's what it always is. Yes, that's the correct word. A piece of art. It's always a piece of art that encourages
multimedia.
It encourages people to think. So, like, to go back on the Anton thing, that's why I was mentioning it, was we did that, and during the performance, what we did was, first of all, we started in black and white. Then we started to introduce slight bits of color, and then the set designer and the artist that we worked with, she started to actually move. So it became a moving art piece. So she started to move pieces around, and we started to break down barriers and all this. And it was to make people, you know, reflect on how they got through lockdown, I suppose, and how we were coming out of lockdown at the time, you know. And then even we worked with the video designer and the video director to start to open up the screen and, you know, move from one ratio out to a wide screen and lift it up and, you know, cinematically open up the screen as well. So all the time it was about trying to build on the concept of what we were trying to achieve. And it's the same with this album. You know, we're trying to build on the concepts and as you say, the themes that were coming up in the album all the time, you know.
I want to talk also actually just briefly about the album art. So it features a child with a mask, with like a face mask on, and in the background some steel kind of, to me anyway, maybe it's just my interpretation. I don't know if it was intentional, but it kind of resembles a crucifix. And just to the right of the frame, there's an assembly of like various different posters, including a poster of Orwell's 84. Yeah, I was wondering like what the kind of the intent was with the album art.
Are you familiar with the Paris the student riots in Paris in '69? Yes, that's just
Yeah.
exactly what it was. But the intent was to show that this future that we're creating right now in the present is not going to be lived by us, and it's for these. It's going to be the next generation that's going to be left with it. And that's literally what we went for. And a lot of them drawings were actually done by a fourth class primary school in Central Model School in Dublin. So my partner, she's a teacher, she got them all to design, what do you want to be in the future? Or how do you see your future? And I was thinking we'd get back some stick figures and different things. We got back amazing pieces of work from these 10-year-olds, you know, and these ideas, like the ideas that they were coming up with, you know, was just incredible. But my favorite one had to be one of the 10-year-olds. Just he wants to play football, so he just drew a big football pitch. Yeah. And that resonated with me because when I was younger, you know, we all wanted to be a footballer. Everyone wanted to be a footballer when they were younger, you know. So the concept was, it was to kind of showcase that, like, you know, we're creating this future, but it's not us that's going to be living it. And these guys are the ones, you know, that are going to be living through whatever we leave them, you know. The crucifix part just was a happy coincidence. When we were shooting Sean McMahon, who shot the album art, when he shot it, he was like, "You want to take a look at this?" He says, "It looks like it looks like a," and I was like, "Leave it in, do it," you know.
Yeah.
We didn't go out and pick a site that had steel crucifix in it. It just happened, and we were like, "Yes, definitely," you know. And again, you know, we drew on, you know, a lot of our artwork, like, you know, especially Banksy. There's a lot of Banksy in that. I think that's one of the things that I always get drawn to, is that kind of Banksy artwork of, you know, the excuse me, the young guy who's plastering posters on the walls, you know. Mm-hmm. And I think we mentioned it lyrically, I think, somewhere as well, put posters on the walls and stuff like that. So yeah, I was very, very happy with the way it turned out. Took a lot of work, standing in the rain of a Saturday morning trying to, you know, plaster all these things on the wall and then clean them all off the same wall, so we didn't get in trouble for it. But yeah, it looks really well and it turned out so well. Yeah, so we're really happy with it.
One thing that's kind of interesting that I think you're talking about is like, I remember, I don't know if have you ever seen the documentary The Rocky Road to Dublin by any chance?
Is that was that at Dundalk? Is it on YouTube?
It might be. It was actually, I think, banned here for several years. But it was a documentary that was made in the 1960s. About I forget his name, but he was a journalist who worked for the Irish Times, who went to France and lived there, and then he came back and made this documentary. and it's kind of like a criticism of kind of the Irish state and kind of state censorship and things like that at the time,
Okay,
including.
wow, yeah.
But there is an interesting aspect to the end of it where, and actually, it's interesting you mentioned the Paris riots. The film actually was one of the last films that debuted at Cannes that year before the riots disrupted the festival. But
Okay.
but what's really interesting is that there's a shot at the end of that film where you see a kind of hope for the kids. So it's like there's this idea that the tide is shifting in a way, and that the future is going to be more optimistic. And I guess for a while it was like, those kids probably lived through like the Celtic Tiger, for example, through an
Yeah.
era of prosperity. Do you
Mm.
think there's optimism for the future generations from your perspective?
Uh, yeah, I'm always optimistic. I'm always questioning, and because of the work I do so myself, I'm a youth worker, so I'm constantly looking at society and constantly looking at, you know, the marginalized groups and how best to kind of help them. And it was a theorist, Paulo Freire, who kind of said, without educating the people, as you were saying, or without highlighting the stuff to the people, that they can't become informed and can't make their own decisions. But if we do this, if we do that, if we highlight these things, or we give them the knowledge that they need, then they themselves can create the escape that's warranted. And yeah, I'm always optimistic, and I think now, especially now in Ireland, we've certainly turned a corner, or we've got younger. The voting population has got younger, and we are starting now to question, like, our old conservative ways, and you see that quite a lot, and it's happening all the time. So I'm very optimistic, but also you always have to have that air of caution, because you just never know what's going to come around the corner. But it's I think we have the ability, we have the capability, like, to move in the right direction, to move where we need to go anyway. Yeah.
Yeah, because I think it's interesting in a lot of sense that like Irish art really, let's say since like the 18th century, there's always been, I think, a sense of like despondency, and a sense of, as we are talking about, kind of elegy, and it can be interpreted as morose. I think most Irish playwrights and artists and songwriters and what have you have a good way of weaving a good nature through that in a sense. But yeah, I was wondering, like, in the sense that we do seem like a lot more advanced now than we did back then. Like, protection of, say, for example, civil liberties seems better than it was maybe even in the 20th century. Like a lot of like previous artists would have had to contend with state censorship, trying to uphold kind of cultural hegemony at the time, which doesn't really seem to be the case. People seem to be able to express ideas now. I was wondering, do you see a tide of, I guess, optimistic or upbeat art, in the sense that people will be content with the kind of government they live under, or something like that?
Yeah, I mean, like, you can be content with the government, and you can be content with, where your place is at, or where you are at in society. But at the same time, there's always going to be something. There's always going to be something that's going to be contentious. You know what I mean? And as I was saying to you before, like, I wrote the social contract, and it just happened to be, I had a few encounters with some homeless people in Dublin, who were lovely, and I'm forever stopping and talking to them, just because of my nature, really. So, you had them, and then you're talking about the Me Too movement. There's always going to be something. Black Lives Matter. Society that's what's happening now. Like, we are questioning everything now, and there's always going to be something that we need to question, or something that's not sitting right. Like, look at Paris now at the minute, like, or France at the minute. They're actually, that their right to retire early, or to retire earlier, is being taken away from them. So, and I think artists, and again, yeah, I think Irish artists actually were probably going right back, yeah, to the early 1900s, and maybe forward, again, constantly looking at what's going on, what's happening, and highlighting maybe some injustices in a humorous way. So I think I think we're in a better place, but I think there's definitely always going to be something that we need to highlight. And as artists and as songwriters and painters and poets, we constantly need to be highlighting these things, or at least looking at them, because there's just ways of expressing them. And I suppose there's ways of getting around censorship is by expressing them in certain ways as well. So yeah, I don't know if that answers the question, but yeah, I think that's where my head would be at. I definitely think, and I said before, I've expressed it before in other interviews, where I definitely think that it's as an artist, it's something that you should strive to do in some shape or form. And you don't have to, like, it doesn't define who you are as an artist. You might not, that might not be your MO, but if you have a voice and you have a platform, then yeah, you should be making some comments about something, maybe, if you want to.
Well, I think your music is obviously very didactic and very well, it's very didactic and it's very politically conscious and socially charged. I was wondering, you're currently in the midst of a nationwide tour, which brings you to Galway, Dublin, Derry, Cork, Kilkenny, Dundalk, and Belfast. I was wondering, when you do like kind of a nationwide tour like that, do you see difference in the reception of the audience? Maybe some places are more receptive to the messages than others, or even just touring like that and just seeing the country. Do you think that adds like new perspectives? Because I think anyone just by nature can get kind of centralized in their thinking, just because like they see, oh, this is my immediate surroundings, this is what the entire country is like, what I mean?
Yeah, no, definitely. And actually, we were in Derry on Friday night, and there was a few lads came up to me afterward, and they spoke about how they were happy to hear someone coming down and talking about how society. Well, that's what they kind of said to me, like, oh, we love them songs you were talking about and some of the things you were talking about. And obviously they have no government at the minute. So they're obviously on a different journey than we are, but it's the country, like, for such a small country, such a broad, outlook, and such a broad, I suppose, journey of what we're going on, but like, and you mentioned like being didactic. It's obviously, but we don't feel like we're preaching it either, that kind of way. People can pick up what they want to pick up, like, for example, the taking liberties, as I said to you before, it's literally was an overheard conversation about somewhere to take heroin on Sheriff Street, and it kind of led from there. But I think that, there's the lyrics about the motherless child or the fatherless child who has no idea how to get by and all this kind of stuff. And that's just the reality for these people. That's not the same reality that it is in Galway, but it's the same definitely in inner city Dublin, But then if you go up the north, it's a different reality caused and created by different situations. But it's great, and I love it, and I love the reception we're getting at the minute as well. It always seems to be, it's always very positive. But again, it's hard because you're writing these lyrics and you're writing these songs, and you're going, oh, are we being a bit too pretentious here, like, or like, we just being wankers here, like, talking about, like, shit that people will think that we don't know what we're talking about, but it seems to be hitting home,
Do you think also, I mean, that kind of nature of traveling around the country, do you think that also would add a different perspective if, say, for example, you were to write another album? Because, like, actually, one thing I think about, for example, is like in Dublin, for example, a lot of people complain that the cityscape changes so much and so frequently, and that there's never any place for like preservation, where I always find, like, in a lot of other parts of the country, people complain about the opposite. They complain about like stagnation and how things don't change. But do you think, like, when you want to make a scope for, when you want to make something which articulates the frustrations of a nation, let's say, and I'm not saying that was necessarily your intent, but do you think, like, you have to kind of be reflective of kind of all the needs in that sense? And do you think kind of traveling and touring and being peripatetic kind of helps that?
Yeah, because you get an insight then into what's going on around the country, and again, like more so as well, again, as I said to you up the north, like, like I'm really interested, I'm really excited about playing Belfast. Just kind of see or gauge the crowd reaction. But as I said to you, Derry the other night was very interesting in the fact that like a lot of these people were out having a good time, but at the same time they themselves brought up the fact that like, they had no government, or like they themselves brought up that they were talking about United Ireland, from a completely different mindset and a completely different outlook, So you have to be, if you're going to try and do these things, you have to be in tune, or try and at least be in tune with what's going on in the streets, like the man on the streets, because you could get things completely wrong, as I say, like, or you could come across as fake, in a kind of way, if you're not sure about what you're talking about, I'm from a working class background myself, so it's I can relate to these things, and I work, as I said to you, constantly. I'm working in the community sector as well, so I'm constantly aware of what's going on. But yeah, to be in touch with the people is probably the best place to be. And again, we actually were writing the album. One of the things that we kind of had said was, what would we be happy with the outcome? And one of the outcomes was that we could be seen as a band of the people, but the majority more so than the artistic minority. That makes sense,
It does. Yeah, and you mentioned that like you're working and stuff, and I was wondering like, how do you kind of balance not only your work life but the work life of like so many band members, in terms of like when it comes to touring, when it comes to meeting up to practice or to record? How do you kind of juggle all those schedules?
It's very hard. It's very hard. And especially like Peter and Pork, who recorded the album, or the drummers and the bass player in the band. They're in two other bands. Roisin is she's an amazing trad musician, and in her own right, and she does her own albums as well. And it's just very hard, But again, we just try and make it work as best we possibly can. And Ella doesn't live in Ireland anymore, and again, she had to move because there was no jobs here, there was no future here for her, so she moved to England. So again, hello, I mean, that's great writing material. It's a great thing to talk about when you're on stage. To say like, we have a cello player, but she's not here tonight because she couldn't be, and that gets a great reaction then when you explain why. And it's very hard, but we manage to balance it. And I think there's because of the love of what we're doing, and how well the album's being received at the minute, really, really helps us.
Is there any intent to do international tours? And if so, how would you kind of manage, I guess, that?
Oh yeah, there's absolutely an intent to go out and do more touring. That we've drawn out a plan of what we'd like for the next 18 months to 2 years. And part of that is to get out internationally, but it would just be a case of, I suppose, trying to book it in or around, or in a way that it means that we can maybe take a week off, 2 weeks off, or whatever from work or stuff. I'd be happily take leave from work to go and do this, because I love doing it. So, but yeah, it would definitely be an intent, and we'd love to get like onto mainland Europe, love to get into America. It would be great. I think even this stuff, even though it's a kind of a national thing that we're writing about, can definitely be recognized internationally as well. It's not just unique to Ireland.
Yeah, I think the kind of culture of sort of international global communication that we're in now kind of really exposes how similar the kind of strifes are in all, like, kind of globally. And yeah, I think like income inequality and homelessness, like factors like that, are unfortunately kind of a factor in like even like some of the biggest like industrialized like prosperous countries. It's like it seems like I don't know. It seems like we have different modes of government, some more left-leaning than others, some more right-leaning than others. Yeah, a lot of these problems still persist. And yeah, I think it's just interesting like that we still, whether you're in like Ireland or Germany or, Argentina or wherever, we're all kind of like struggling in similar means to kind of combat, I don't know, just basic human rights, really.
Oh, absolutely, yeah. And I mean, with the rise of the right in many in a lot of the countries across Europe and America, like, well, I mean, America only really has a left and a right, but the rise of the right, certainly in the last couple of years, has been something that has been detrimental, I think, to definitely to, like, the equality that should exist for all humans, and it's just so bizarre. Like, and like you were talking about, like, topics that are always like I was saying, like, there's always going to be something coming up. Like, you look at America now, like, in some of the states are, they're voting against, like, it's with gender inequality, basically, or LGBTI plus inequality. So it's just so bizarre, the mindset of some people. But look, I think that makes existence very interesting to be able to have someone to debate with, you know. But yeah, I think the stuff will resonate, and there's enough in there. I think they'll get people interested, and then musically as well. I think a lot of it leans on a lot of Irish and trad stuff. So, and that's always accepted well throughout the globe.
One thing I'd actually like to gauge you in a bit is because we were talking about future generations. We were talking about the rise of the far right, which unfortunately seems to be kind of happening everywhere. I mean, we saw Maloney's government get in Italy, for example, and Sweden as well, and Ireland. Like, even though it hasn't really spilled over into electoral politics yet, we do have like the nascent National Party here who are gaining traction. I think simultaneously, though, what's kind of what you're seeing too is also a lot of the rise in the far left, and you see a lot of people who are talking about, for example, socialism, and are talking about different methods to kind of combat the kind of capitalist system or the kind of mixed economy we lived in. And for future generations, do you think the kind of sort of milquetoast center left, center right that you and I probably grew up with, and generations grew up with, is going to be satisfactory to anybody anymore, or do you think it is just going to push further left and right?
Yeah, I think that divide is definitely that divide, actually. And again, just during lockdown, and people having, well, in my opinion, probably too much time on their hands, but that divide certainly became evident and grew. And I think that gap is widening even more so, to the point now. And I would consider myself pretty much center socialist, but I would definitely look to the point where maybe the left is getting too extreme as well. And I know, look, I would agree with the majority of what the left would talk about, but you still need to, I do firmly believe you still need to have these thoughts and expressions, debates, ideas, and ideology and politics. You need all these things. So, but yeah, I definitely think that gap is widening and has widened, and it's only going to increase, I think, because of, I suppose, well, the advent of social media, and then now that everything's just on the touch of our fingers on a smartphone. It's I always liken it to, I suppose, I heard before, the printing press when it was first invented, created, or there was an ability to fill the gap for ideas, and some bizarre ideas and some ridiculous ideas, and it was, people had the ability then to express themselves. And I think now what we're experiencing with the increased advent of social media, and everyone having the ability to have their say, that's just that's the next form of a printing press, because everyone can have their idea, and that's what's going to separate us even more. But I think for future generations, I think, there's always going to be a right, there's always going to be an opposition, there's always going to be different ideas. But I think what needs to happen is that we need to come to terms with the fact that this is a thing, and that we now need to be able to, I suppose, look at the bigger picture. And again, going back to Paulo Freire, that the Brazilian theorist I was talking about, he speaks about, the oppressor and the oppressive, or the oppressed and the oppressor. And he said, like, you can't change the mindset of the oppressor without first explaining to them their actions. So instead of fighting with them, he said, you should explain to them and try to get them to see where you're coming from. and from there, then they will be able to understand better the impact that they're having on society or on the oppressed. So I think that's where we need to go. Sorry, yeah, I was just going to say that's where we need to be. What we need to be conscious of.
Yeah. I think we have seen that with the rise of social media, and what I find kind of interesting is that a lot of people, the internet, kind of when I was growing up, it was sort of promised with this prospect of democratizing the world, and I think it has done that. But I think the reality people are learning is that democracies are also full of assholes and bigots, and if you're gonna allow for expression, they're also going to come out of the woodwork too. But I think the benefit is also simultaneously you do see marginalized voices. Like I think acceptance of, for example, trans people and acceptance of non-white people who might have been historically oppressed. Like you are getting their voices and you are hearing their side of the story, and I do think that is creating social awareness, and people are kind of aware of, okay, it's not okay to use, for example, these terms that maybe one time would have been, they're actually deemed offensive now. But I think simultaneously you also get like a really kind of reactionary pushback to that, where it's just like, I don't know, it seems like people are uncomfortable with that change or something, if that makes sense.
No, that's exactly, that's exactly the way I would see it. There's change is going to happen, and look, the change happens in the world all the time, and you can't, it's just like the way things are, it's going to go on. But yeah, we need to stop thinking that it's going to be an uncomfortable change, but still to challenge what we don't believe in, but let's challenge it in a way that we're actually trying to encourage a perception, or at least a thought concept around, okay, you don't agree with transgender, but at least see it from their point of view. So we have these ability now to do that, and I think that's maybe in terms of and I know back to even the band name, that's it, with George Orwell maybe missed, but he was speaking in 1930 whatever when he wrote 1984, but he missed that other idea where he talked about a totalitarian, this is totally what the world is going to be like, or this is the way things are going to be. And even though it's very, very akin to it, which it's amazing to think that he nailed it so much on the head. I think we have the ability now a lot more to engage in dialect. And it's our responsibility now as humans. And that's what I was kind of saying to you about the left becoming too extreme, is that a lot of them are more up for a fight now than trying to engage in some sort of debate or conversation. So I definitely think we need to use the tools that we have, and we definitely need to become more aware. And it's great that there is the possibility for everyone to become more aware, but again, be aware that not everything's going to be the truth, and find out what is the truth. And our first EP was actually called "Truth Is the First Victim," which was a Les Levine. It was based off a Les Levine photograph or photography display, and he was just talking about how in conflict and how in war, truth is always lost. And that's literally what we're experiencing right now. We're just experiencing a war of concepts.
Yeah.
So we need to as society and as people, we just need to be aware that these things are going to happen, and we just need to make ourselves more informed and be informed, but also, take on board that it has to be a conversation more so than an uncomfortable debate.
One thing I wanted to ask you, because given your band name, I was wondering, a lot of people have been saying recently that a lot of people have been misappropriating Orwell's thoughts, and especially 1984, making reference to it. In fact, a lot of people are saying people reference it without having read it. I'll say I haven't read 1984, although for some reason I own 2 separate copies of it. I was wondering, do you have any opinion on that? People kind of misappropriating Orwell?
I mean, again, you can't. I don't think you can actually have a go at someone for having an idea about a form of artwork. It's what they take from it, But yeah, it's even funny sometimes, when we say, "Oh yeah, what's the band name? Oh yeah, Orwell's 84. Oh yeah, 1984. Yeah." it's that's what's going on right now, and you're like, is it? Yeah, okay, cool, man. But yeah, I mean, a lot of people don't. It's funny, guys, and like, a lot of them don't even know like the rest of his works either, which is quite hilarious as well. But they know the name for some reason, and it's not like it's a common name or anything, like, but it just seems to be like 1984 seems to be the big thing out there. I mean, I don't really bat an eyelid at anyone who's, if they've got an idea about a piece of art, so be it. Like, who am I to say that they're right or wrong? Because I put my lyrics out there. We put our music out there. If someone doesn't like it, what am I going to do? Bring them down to room 101 and start, forcing them to listen to the music or whatever. Like, I mean, look, again, as I say, art is definitely there to be interpreted in whatever way that the person wants, the individual wants to. That's the beauty of art, Mm-hmm. So, yeah, if anyone has ideas, like, I'm more than happy to talk to them about it. But yeah, I can't say that they're wrong.
Would you say accusing someone of misinterpreting Orwell is Orwellian?
Yeah, that's actually, because well, I mean, the thing about it is then, because in 1984, isn't it, they changed, they try to change the thought process of the people all the time, through the world. So maybe I'll come out with a far right album the next time and see how people take that up, and it'll be very Orwellian then, yeah.
One final question about the album is it begins with 15 seconds of essentially studio banter as a separate track, as its own track. I was wondering, why was that?
Because, well, it was a thought after the songs were written, and we wanted to box it off as an art piece, mm-hmm. And the idea of the shock and a mock, like, I'm a Gaeilgeoir, Sean Byrne, who's also in the band's at Gaeilgeoir, and we just love that idea of having some sort of Irish, like Colleen, obviously, mm-hmm. is one of the tracks on our EPs is hugely infused in Irish. So it was just to kind of wrap it up, and put a start and an end to the ideas of what was in the album, And then on the vinyl, eventually, when they come, we have side A it's not side A and side B, it's Sorka and Dorka.
All right.
Light and dark, So yeah, we're full of little quirks and ideas like that. But it was literally just to box it off. So, like, as I said, there's just an issue at the minute with the distribution on the digital, where a mock hasn't gone up, but we're trying to get that resolved. But yeah, in the studio banter then was just to, and if you hear, actually, I don't know, have you heard the last track of mock, or are you on Spotify?
I haven't. I didn't get it. I think the press release.
Oh, sorry, I'll send you on the press release after this. But if you listen,
sorry, I had the press release. I don't think it was featuring that. I could be wrong. I don't know.
Mock is the last track after How Does It Feel, so it's a kind of instrumental stuff. Mm-hmm. And if you listen then to the intro in the track, you hear Peter actually working out the piece of, like, he's working at the riff on the piano. So the piano kind of goes da-na-na-na-na, da-na-na-na, and then we come in to wake up, but then at the end you hear the full, which became a mock, which was like the outro, Do
you enjoy that? Do you enjoy kind of in a sort of French New Wave kind of way, I guess, like making people aware that they're listening to an album? Well, simultaneously, I mean, also, as you were mentioning there, I mean, with the piano, like kind of giving people an insight into the creative process of actually making this album, and then the studio banter, the kind of actual labor of making the album, in the sense that these are real people in the studio with these instruments.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, no, that's my vibe. Especially now with the AI Oasis albums just come out there last week. So like, we need to let people know that these are real people in the studio, really doing these things. Yeah. No, I love it, and as an album, I firmly believe, like, it has to be a piece of art. It has to, and I love. Like, I'm a big fan of the Beatles and a big fan of Bowie, and all these guys who are like really kind of trying to think about their artwork and the concepts and how tracks are positioned and why they're positioned, and mm-hmm. how do you construct a side A? Why do you start and finish a side A in certain ways? Why do you start a side B in certain ways? And I love it all. Like, I just think it's full of creative juices, and it's just great. I think the album concept is in its original form is probably dying out. You know, people just put out vinyl now, or they just put out an album now. But like, we went real deep on it. Like, you know, the album artwork had to be right, even down to the labels, as I said, on the, and calling it Circa and Durka, you know, and right, like getting all them little details right. You know, I think it's, and I think the only ones that really got close to it, definitely in Ireland recently, well, like Jinx Lennon's forever doing it, but I definitely think like David Keenan on Crude on his latest album, like even the artwork on that is certainly, you know, resonates, and it sounds like an album. And I think probably Skinty Fia as well with the Fontaines is probably, Moral Capital, actually their album, their recent album as well. Again, great pieces of artwork, you know. Gigi's Recovery, wasn't it?
Yeah. I was also wondering, because like you guys self-release, so is that like been an issue releasing vinyl? I know like it's a very expensive and time-consuming endeavor. Judging by a response you gave earlier, I assume that you're still in the waiting period for the vinyl to come out. So I was wondering like what have been the kind of endeavors of getting that, and why do you think it's important to release stuff on vinyl nowadays?
For us, it was to like, you know, kind of stand up behind and put your chest out and say, look, this is what we're about. Come and have a listen, you know. And I think the vinyl gives you, again, as I say, that opportunity to be expressive and to create a piece of art, to physically hold something. And I think with Spotify and things like that, like, I think that's kind of lost on people because you can't physically hold it and you can switch between tracks. And you don't, you know, with a vinyl though, you have to listen to it as a piece, you know. And like, I mean, it kills my partner if I stick on an album on Spotify, even I have to listen to it start to finish. I'm like, stop, don't be switching, not switching songs. You know. So it was very important for us to kind of have that avenue, but it's very difficult. And we got a lot of support through the GoFundMe, which is still open until June. And then we got a lot of, and I have to thank Create Loud, who did fund us as well through the arts grants. And we've applied for different pieces of you know, through the Arts Council and through Create Loud as well. We've applied for different grants and stuff. So hopefully we won't be out of pocket. But at the same time, it's hard when you don't have a distributor like, or a major label behind you, you know, to get rid of it. But hopefully they will. Hopefully I won't have crates of them lying around the place.
I guess the final question I'll just ask is like, what do you have planned for the future, immediate or distant?
So we're on tour at the minute. We do have a video that will come out for Border and the Mistress. It's going to come out in May or June, around that time. And then we actually are going to release another single off the album. We'll have a fourth single, which again was a decision that was thought over long and hard, was to have 4 singles come off it. And then we will be finishing up around August, I think, because we had to reschedule Galway. So Galway's in August, and then after that we'll be back on the lip maybe in October. But in the meantime, like, hopefully we'll get a few festival slots, and hopefully we'll be on Irish Music Week as well. Hopefully, maybe, you know, obviously we've applied for it, so if that comes about, that'll be great. And then it will be to try and build on this. We have the next, an EP wrote, ready to go, but we won't be releasing that for the next while anyway. And then,
is that just so you don't want to overshadowing the album, or?
We want to give the album a good lifeline, you know. So we've earmarked about 12 months for it, which is kind of, I think, good enough considering there's 4 singles coming out of it, and it's still garnering traction. Like, so it's not like it hasn't died a death. It didn't die the day it was released, you know. So there's loads of stuff happening still for it, you know. So but the music for the EP will be quite different, but it'll be fun. Another avenue to go.
That's perfect. Is there anything like that before we wrap up?
Look, I mean, just thank everyone for listening, and, you know, and come down and see the shows. Like we're back in Dublin, we're in Galway, Cork, and Dundalk as well, Belfast. Come see the shows and you know get on the GoFundMe, buy a piece of merch. You know, love your friends and family, hug a dog, and kiss someone randomly.
Perfect. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you so much, Aaron. It's been a pleasure. I actually really enjoyed that, man. Thank you.
Yeah, me too, man. Take care.
Yeah, and I'll send you, or so we'll keep in contact with email. Man.
Yeah, absolutely.
Definitely, man. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.
Take care of yourself. Bye. Thank you for listening to that episode of Post-Burnout.com interviews. We hope you enjoyed and stay tuned for more.